Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our main event! Hosted by Eric McMahon, it's Cageside with John Morgan!
And welcome everybody to another episode of Cageside with John Morgan. I am your host, Eric McMahon. Fun episode here on the docket. Get to go over everything that was UFC pay-per-view in Brazil. I can't do it alone. I'm going to go ahead, bring in my co-host. You can find him on Twitter at JohnMorgan_MMA. His name is on the marquee. John Morgan, what's up, pal?
Man, it just felt so good to have fights again, like big fights, right? I mean, pay-per-view weekend. I was a little bit bummed. I mean, I'd made the trip down to Brazil a lot of times, and I was getting some messages from some friends that were hanging out on the beach and having a couple of frosty beverages out there as the waves were rolling in. I was a little bit jealous, but it was nice. It was nice to watch it from the comfort of home and spend time with the family over the weekend, but get to watch some great fights, man. There's just nothing like a big UFC title fight, and this pay-per-view, man, it took me on a journey. There were emotions, man, throughout the night. It was a great card.
We thought we had one retirement, ended up being another one. We'll dive into that, but I want to get into you not being in Brazil. You know, like when you buy a big purchase, sometimes you get buyer's remorse. Do you have like the reverse buyer's remorse not being there?
It's funny because, again, as the pictures were coming in of them sitting on the beach, I was like, whoo, man, I made a mistake. I should have gone down there. But then when you realize, you know, me in Las Vegas, they're 5 hours ahead of time. So as we're wrapping up the pay-per-view, you know, it's like 4 a.m. Brazilian time. And then they still got the long flight to get back to the city. I'm sitting there watching NFL playoffs yesterday, cooking out with my family while they're sitting on a plane coming home. So it's that trade-off, man. There's really, honestly, there's no place I'd rather be than on Saturday night Cageside, man. You get to see the fights close up, and then honestly, like getting to talk to the athletes in the immediate aftermath, and like in being those first interviews that they do, and seeing that raw emotion, man. I love that. But, and I know you get it, man. As a father, I just have to realize during this time that's giving away a week that, you know, I can't be with my kid, that I can't take him to Jiu-Jitsu practice, that I can't take him to soccer, and those are weeks that I'll just never get back. You know, so once he's gone and off to college, maybe I'll start hitting the road a little more freely, but I'm just trying to find that balance, you know, still be a dedicated mixed martial arts reporter, still cover the sport as closely as possible, but not give away 30 weeks of my life a year to being on the road. You know, it's a tough balance.
And like, listen, I love my wife more than anybody on the face of this earth, but a lot of times it ain't worth the shit that you're going to catch from the wife either. Like, listen, I'll say the quiet part out loud. I know what you're saying, John.
This is true too. This is true. I used to joke about it but it's kind of sad when you really think about it. But I used to say, like, my wife is like a single mother, like half the year. When I was traveling to every single UFC event, yeah, like half the year she was a single mom, having to do everything by herself. You know, take to school, pick up from school, cook, do all the things. You know, so yeah, trying to be a present member of the family. But yeah, I get that fear missing out. I get that FOMO when it's Saturday night and then those special events. I will say, you know, Brazil, one thing we would always do, because you get done about 4 or 5 in the morning. You get back to the hotel just as the sun is coming up over the ocean, and we would always kind of grab a post-fight beer and watch the sun come up and, you know, sip it, have that, and then go in and crash out tonight. I missed that experience, but like I said, it was nice to be at home with my kid, you know, cooking out and watching some NFL.
I hear you on all of that. Well, let's just go ahead. Let's dive right into the UFC pay-per-view that was in Brazil this past Saturday night. I think we all knew that Glover had a stylistic matchup problem. Me and you both said experience level was going to go to Glover, which may have tipped the scales to him for victory. I did not see the scenario that he would have been battered as bad as he got battered. Did you see any of that scenario prior to?
I really didn't. I mean, I felt that this was kind of a toss-up. But if you looked at the betting odds, I mean, they were just about a pick 'em. It was Jamahal Hill as a slight favorite, but only very, very slight. So I think a lot of people felt, you know, kind of the same way we did, that if this thing stays on the feet, it favors Jamahal Hill, but Glover Teixeira does have power. If it goes to the ground, Glover Teixeira is certainly going to dominate there. But, man, I kind of liked Glover Teixeira in the underdog role because of the lack of experience. Here's Jamahal Hill stepping in on 6 weeks' notice, basically. You know, was making his way up the rankings, but was not in the immediate title picture until all these things happened, right? The draw in December, the injuries, all that. So I thought, man, he's getting kind of rushed to this position. he's going to the Lion's Den, right? He's got to fly to Brazil. He's got to be in that environment. This is the biggest stage of his career. How's he going to respond? And you see this a lot with athletes, right? Mixed martial arts, really honestly in any sport, but mixed martial arts especially, where you kind of rise up the ranks, then you get to a level and you go, oh, whoa, I didn't know it was like that, you know, and you have your little setback, and then that's where you go, okay, now I know where I need to be, and you step up. And I thought that might be that for Jamahal Hill, where he'd find out, okay, I'm not there yet, but I know where I need to be. Instead, this is a virtuoso performance from Jamahal Hill. I mean, I feel like he had the best performance of his career, grew as a fighter right in front of our eyes, and is now a UFC champion. Unbelievable performance.
50-44 on all scorecards performance. A lot of people saying, man, we need to stop this fight. Glover in his post-fight saying, I may be too tough for my own good. Not only that, I got to mention this interesting stat coming out of Saturday night. Jamahal Hill sets a new striking record with 232 significant strikes landed in a light heavyweight fight. Glover, at the age of 43, absorbed 232 significant strikes over the course of 25 minutes.
Unbelievable. And was just, I mean, and showed it, right? I mean, nasty cuts all over, blood flowing everywhere. His corner is kind of saying, hey, man, let's not send you out for the 5th round. Let's stop this. I thought maybe the doctors might come in and stop it, but Glover Teixeira, being made of something else, just a different kind of man, is like, nope. I'm going out there and I'm finishing this fight. I'm going to get this last 5 minutes in. And by the way, in the 5th round, got a takedown. I was like, are you kidding me? Is he going to find a way to win this fight? He's on top. But Jamahal Hill, this was just a great performance from Jamahal Hill from start to finish. We knew the striking was going to be good, but it was better than we've ever seen it. But the takedown defense was stellar as well. I mean, Glover made no attempt to hide what he was trying to do. He goes for a takedown like 5 seconds in, and Jamahal Hill brushes him off. Now, you know, it's not a deep takedown attempt. It's just a little tease, not overcommitting. But then it just kept going and going and going. And just Jamahal, great takedown defense, battering Glover Teixeira. And as you said, I mean, Glover absorbing those blows, but just being a different kind of human being, man. Hats off to Glover Teixeira for making it to the final round, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all hope to be the man that Glover is, but when the rubber hits the road, how many of us really would have gone out for that 5th round, 4th round? Who knows? I mean, just getting battered from start to finish. And I always say that, a lot of people say, oh, I'd go out on my shield. To be able to do that, you have to be a special human. There's very few of those, and they are at that elite level of this sport, but it's nonetheless disheartening and inspiring to watch all at the same time.
It really is. I mean, like I said, it was this wide range of emotions throughout the night, and it was this wide range of emotions in the main event. I mean, Glover Teixeira, one of the most respected athletes in the entire company, in the entire sport of mixed martial arts. I mean, the dude is an absolute legend of a human being, not just a fighter, man, just a kind soul, and you see him going out there, and he wanted that last bit of glory, right? I mean, he knew that, it was coming time to hang him up, but he wanted to get that last little bit, kind of go out on top, and this upstart contender in Jamahal Hill, spoiled all that. But credit to Glover, made it all the way to the end. He easily could have just said, you know what, I've had enough, no more. I've lost. But he said, no, I'm going to make it to that final bell. Went out there and, like I said, tried to make something happen in that 5th round, rallied a little bit, but Jamahal Hill ultimately, pushed and tested as he was as well, found a way to get back to his feet and just. Man, the utmost respect between these two guys, the class between these two dudes that they showed in there, the emotion that Jamahal Hill showed when he was crowned champion. I mean, just unbelievable scenes from Rio.
Before we get into the potential that is Jamahal Hill and the upside and the long reign that this kid can have, Glover takes the gloves off, gives a passionate Portuguese speech, essentially saying, I am too tough for my own good. It's great to recognize, by the way. I want to dedicate my time into training Pahea, making him a light heavyweight champion at one point. And I'm done fighting. And to see those a lot of times is just, like you said, wide range of emotions, but it's really kind of cool to be able to see a guy like Glover fighting at the pinnacle of the sport, being not only the UFC, but fighting for the strap as a former champion, being able to take them gloves off in Rio de Janeiro, his home country of Brazil.
Yeah, pretty cool, man. And to do it, I mean, at 43 years old, like obviously it's not easy to compete at a high level. I saw there was a fan that tweeted something. I retweeted the other day. So cool. And I checked on it to verify to make sure it was accurate, but it was. But the UFC rankings debuted 10 years ago. And Glover Teixeira was in the initial rankings at number 4 10 years ago.
Whoa.
And he finishes 10 years later at number 2, having never left the UFC's official rankings. So you think about that at that age, to be performing at that high level for a decade. That is unbelievable. So the fighter is incredible. But listen, for people that don't know Glover behind the scenes, I was in Brazil one time, and they were doing basically like a community event, essentially, where the UFC was helping plant trees in the city to help offset their carbon footprint and all that. Glover Teixeira was one of the athletes that was there. And, a lot of times athletes will show up at these community events and, it's just, hey, okay, how you doing? I'm here. Hey, we're the UFC. We're going to do good. But Glover was there on his hands and knees helping to plant these trees and, like, showing the kids, like, how you pack the dirt properly and how you water it properly. And I'm like, Glover, what is it? You have a pat? He's like, man, when I was starting out, when I first got to the United States and I was trying to I was a landscaper. And I did this. This is how I supported myself so I could chase my dream of fighting. He's like, I know this stuff. I love this stuff. This is how I made my living. And he was sharing his passion with these kids and showing. I mean, it was just, that's the type of guy he was. He could just show up and be like, hey, I'm Glover Teixeira. I'm in the UFC. We're glad to be doing great things in your community. But no, he's down there literally getting his hands dirty, helping plant these trees and teach these kids how to do it. It's just a marvel of a human being. And so, when I say he's one of the most respected guys in the industry, I mean that. Behind the scenes, his peers, that man is a true living legend. And he'll still be involved. That's what's crazy is, I see him at CFFC events, for instance, coming and cornering his local fighters. He's got this gym, just guys that are on the ups. So he's not just, helping the highest level, as you said. He's trying to help ahead as a reigning UFC middleweight champion, maybe move up to UFC light heavyweight champion. He's not only helping at the top end, he's helping at the base end as well, which is something we see in martial arts a lot. But it's so cool to see those guys at the very top saying, no, look, I'm still giving my time to my 1-0 fighter, to my 2-0 fighter that's just making his way. The guy is a class human being. It's a shame to see him go, but it's the right time. And he goes out in a title fight in Brazil. You would have liked to do it in victory, but that's just unfortunately not the way the sport works. So props to him, man. A true legend.
Jamahal Hill, upside, go.
The man is amazing. Early in his career, incredible striking. Now we're seeing the game, rounding a little bit, right? I mean, great takedown defense. I mean, got out of some bad spots jiu-jitsu wise, and now he's going to be buoyed by this confidence, man. Look, tough challenges in that light heavyweight division, man. That is not an easy division to reign over, but this man has what it takes, and the what he's accomplished, and he said it, where I came from. I proved that hard work can get you here, man. And this dude's, done it from out of nowhere where, training in a small gym and, but has been dedicated to it. And now UFC champion. I think he's going to be bolstered by that confidence of this accomplishment. And, man, I'm looking forward to what he accomplishes next. Yuri Prohaska says he's coming with that amazing video that he posted. That was incredible. The former champ, of course, who got injured, who ceded the belt, that started all this, volatility in the light heavyweight division. He's like, I'm coming for you, man. So I don't know if that's going to be the next fight, but I kind of hope it is. Hopefully Yuri Prohaska's recovery is going along. He says it's going well, because that would be one heck of a fight.
Interesting, which I think is going to lend so much credence to, so I've heard interesting things. I got to take a step back. I've heard a lot of interesting things about, do I go on Dana White Contender Series or do I not? A lot of prospects do not go on Contender Series because It's almost a one and done. You have a bad night, your body of work almost didn't matter leading up into that point, which now Jamahal Hill, the first ever UFC champion coming out of Dana White Contender Series. And the Dana White Contender Series has only been around, 3 years now? 3 years. It has now produced a champion, not only a champion at probably the most prestigious division in the sport, light heavyweight.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I think it's a great example for a reason to go on Dana White's Contender Series. And I think the perception is changing just a little bit because now it seems like almost every week, they're giving out 5 contracts. If you win, you're in. But that was the initial perception. And I thought it was honestly a pretty wise one, is that like, look, man, if you don't get the contract, now it kind of mars, and you're facing another top level prospect, and now it kind of mars where you stand, and maybe you're a name that they've already seen, and so they kind of write you off. It's like, well, no, we gave that kid a shot. We're not really interested. So, but now I think it's becoming better because they're giving it. It just seems like now you win and you're in. So, I think it's being a better
contract.
Option.
You get a contract.
That's it.
So.
But to rise all the way to the top, man, it's incredible. And obviously, you see every week. Dana White, when you fight, if you come off a Contender Series, it seems like he's got that little vested interest in you. He wants to help push you a little bit on the if you don't know now you know videos and things like that. So it's a great platform for athletes to potentially jumpstart their career, and this is a huge accomplishment for the show itself.
We all remember the Dana White, do you want to be an Ultimate Fighter from back with the UFC Ultimate Fighter reality series 1. I could just envision some more passionate speeches. Do you want to be a UFC champion? Jamahal Hill did it no less than 2 years ago, starting in this very place. Don't give me this crap about like it's too much of a risk or whatever. Like that is now to me like the impetus of it's going to be what the Contender Series is built around. They were here to build contenders. Guess what? They not only built a contender, they built a champion.
Absolutely. And they're going to push that narrative, and it's an accurate one. So, I mean, I think it's a great path. And I just, on Saturday night as this fight, I tweeted this out as well. I thought it was so amazing because you think about it. 6 weeks ago, Jamahal Hill is sitting at home on his couch watching a light heavyweight title fight play out, right? And he's like, man, one of these days, I'm going to be in a title fight. And what happens? There's a draw. His phone rings. He answers the phone. He says, yes, I'll fight the legend Glover Teixeira. Yes, I'll go to Brazil and I'll face him. Yes, I'll take this challenge, whether he thought he was ready or not. And he got it done. Life-changing. I mean, life-changing. The contract that he's going to have, the sponsorship opportunities that he's going to have, the fact that you can never take that away. But you could go and lose the belt in the next outing. Obviously, he doesn't want to do that. He's going to want to defend it. But they can never take away the fact that you were a UFC champion. That's something you carry with you the rest of your life. And that's a life-changing moment for Jamahal Hill.
And I think he's officially off the Apex roster.
It's funny, right? Because he likes fighting in the Apex so much. He used to call it Sweet Dream Stadium. He didn't call it the Apex. It was Sweet Dream Stadium. But yeah, there's no more UFC Apex fighting for Jamahal Hill.
Let's go ahead and move on to a fight that I think that rivaled the main event. One that the fan perception was not only, it wasn't a co-main event. It was main event 1A, 1B. And that was Brandon Moreno, Davison Figueiredo 4. Crazy that in this sport, a guy can fight somebody 4 times for Figueiredo, 4 times straight. Moreno, 4 out of 5 opponents. And that the masses are still clamoring for it. Now, we finally get to, are we going to shut a door on this rivalry? To be determined, because Moreno wins via TKO doctor stoppage after 3 rounds. Take it from there.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's funny. I know these guys are tired of fighting each other, but I could watch them fight over and over and over again. It's just the way they're paired up, man. It's such an incredible fight. Looks like Davison Figueiredo is going to make the move to 135 pounds for the time being, which is probably wise. He'd had some really difficult weight cuts to get down to flyweight. He's a big flyweight, so I think that's smart. And Brandon Moreno, he holds the edge now, and I think he's ready to move on. And I think the rest of the division is ready to move on. But just from a fan perspective of enjoyment and entertainment, when those two dudes get in a cage together, it is exciting. It's fun. And this one was too, man. So many back and forth scrambles. I'm telling you, I love the flyweight division. When there was talks about maybe scrapping the flyweight division at one point, I was so bummed out about that because I think it's the most entertaining division in the sport because they can just go nonstop for 15, 25 minutes, depending on the rounds. It's exciting. And this was entertaining. A little bit of an unfortunate ending in the way that it ended because basically, Moreno throws a shot, left hand, and the thumb of the left hand strikes the eye. Figueiredo thinks he's been eye poked. Now, I understand, he can't see from the outside looking in. It probably felt like an eye poke. And in some ways, it kind of was because it was the knuckle, but it wasn't an extended thumb. It was tucked in. But anyway, his eye instantly closes. You can't compete at that point. It's entirely closed. And so rightfully, it's waved off. The crowd in Brazil was not happy about it. They ended up pelting Brandon Moreno on his way out of the octagon with
literally the most likable guy too.
The most likable dude, and they're just raining down trash on him. I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. But I think it's important to point out because there seemed to be a lot of discussion that this was an illegal eye poke. It clearly was not from, and you would know, of course, as a licensed official, but that is a clean blow. It was an unfortunate result of the blow. It's not the way that Brandon Moreno intended for it to landed, but it was legal nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, fingers were not extended. Knuckles in the eyes happen, more frequently than most people think. And when they hit, they do damage, and it's just an unfortunate part of, I guess, the glove that they're in. But let's take any controversy out of there, because to me, there's zero controversy in this.
Agreed.
Brandon Moreno was up 2-1, coming off a dominant third round, a dominant that even a judge gave it a 10-8 round. So I think it's really unfair for anybody to say that there's any controversy surrounding it. But I want to pose a question. Now, I know Figueiredo is going to move up to 45, start challenging there, because he looked lean as hell fight week, man. He was shredded. But does this, with the way this fight did end, does this slam the door shut on a fifth fighter? Are these two fighters so perfectly matched for each other that we just give it some time before we run it back?
I wouldn't rule it out entirely, to be honest with you, because again, they did have such a great series. And listen, as I'm watching the thing, I'm like, dude, and I saw a lot of people had the same reaction. Like, I could watch these guys fight all the time, So it's not fair to the division right now. And as you said, they're going to be in different divisions for a little while, but who knows? Maybe at some point, let's see what Figueiredo can accomplish at bantamweight. Now, that's an extremely deep division, so it's not going to be an easy road, but he's a great fighter. What if he rises the ranks and becomes a champion again? And maybe Moreno defends a couple of times and decide he wants to move up to 35. So, I could see them potentially clashing in the future. I don't feel like you have to say never. Do you want to see it right now? No, and I think it's fair to the divisions to let this thing move on. But I wouldn't say that they'll never clash again. We'll see how their journeys go. But if for some reason their journeys lead to each other again, I just can't see fans of the sport saying, "Nah, I don't want to see that fight again," because they were great. They were all great fights.
How good is Brandon Moreno, though? I mean, a guy that came from the Ultimate Fighter, that was cut, to now reigning supreme over the division. And let's be honest, he's been reigning supreme about 3 years now. Now most of it has been caught up with Figueiredo, but still at that level, a guy who got cut.
Unbelievable. And just keeps getting better and better. And again, you talk about the story of Jamahal Hill, Brandon Moreno, a similar story as well, that, hey, just because your time in the UFC ends doesn't mean that it has to be gone forever. You can work your way back to the organization. And not only can you work your way back to the organization, you can work your way back to a championship level. And, that speech that he gave, maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, but one day I'm going to be champion. I mean, just inspiring stuff. And, now you're seeing really just, inspiring the country of Mexico and more athletes wanting to follow in his footsteps and, chase that path to greatness in martial arts. And as you alluded to earlier, one of the nicest dudes that you'll ever meet. I mean, just an absolutely kind soul who loves putting Legos together. I mean, here's this, badass cage fighter that just, collects Funko Pop and puts Legos together and whatever. I mean, he's just a good dude. And it's always nice, the whole nice guys finish last doesn't always have to be true. I mean, this is a nice guy and he's at the top of the division. And to your point, how good is he? The dude just keeps getting better and better. It seems like every single performance out there, he's getting better. He's putting in the work. And man, I can't wait to see what's next for him.
The thing that, like, I sit there and I watch him, and Figueiredo for that matter, but especially Moreno is, and I'm in awe of it, is the precision with the speed that this kid is operating at. Not only in the striking, in the grappling exchanges, in the scrambles, the precision that is happening at a speed that I'm going to say I've never seen before. And I'm even going to include Demetrius Johnson in there, because Demetrius Johnson used speed and some brutality with it. It seems like Moreno is just speed and precision in every single thing he does. And I sit there with my jaw open.
I marvel at it. It again, the flyweight division kind of encapsulates that. It really is that speed. I mean, to me, it's always the fastest division, but he seems to be operating even a higher level than that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes it so fun to me is it's striking into grappling into striking. It's sweeps, it's reversals, it's transitions, just nonstop because they have the cardio, they have the speed to do these things. You know, when I was with MMA Junkie for years and years, I would do the play-by-play where you're literally just typing out what's happening. So
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's like I can't even keep up with all this. It was unbelievable. So yeah, man, it's just so fun to watch, and he's such a great athlete. And listen, this has been a great rivalry. It's been a lot of fun, but now you've got a lot of great flyweights behind them that have been kind of lining up and getting themselves in order. And it looks like Alexandre Pantoja is going to be next. But there's some other phenomenal athletes in the flyweight division as well. So there's going to be a lot of great challenges ahead for Brandon Moreno.
Moving on to our next fight. And now this fight I said I was intrigued by it, and I was intrigued just because Neil Magny takes on all coming. He's very tough, very durable, you know, a lot of great skill sets, taking on Gilbert Burns. And it was intriguing, but from a ranking standpoint, it was a mismatch. But I think we all went into it saying that, you know, Magny is tough enough and good enough that this is going to be a competitive fight. We were wrong. Gilbert Burns is on another level. The rankings mean something for a reason.
Yeah, it was an interesting matchup because Gilbert Burns was just tired of waiting around. You know, he had that amazing fight with Khamzat Chimaev last year, and he was like, well, you know, couldn't get any other fights arranged. So finally, you know, they bring to him Neil Magny, who that you respect the heck out of Neil Magny because he's one of those dudes that's like, yeah, I'll fight anyway. And Neil Magny's deficiency is, you know, his defensive grappling and his defensive wrestling, and so Gilbert Burns, you know, could potentially be a nightmare matchup for him. But Neil Magny's the kind of guy to say, nah, man, I'm here. Who you got for me? Let's go. And it ended up being a stylistic nightmare. I mean, this was a flawless performance from Gilbert Burns. And I think a really smart performance from Gilbert Burns as well, because Gilbert Burns, he can strike as well. He's got some power in his hands. And so,
yeah,
you know,
he dropped Kamaru with a jab, I believe.
Yes, he did. It was a jab. So, I mean, so you think, you know, maybe he wants to go out there and put on a show in Brazil. You know, it's been so long. Maybe he wants to go out there and strike. But Gilbert Burns realized, no, the smartest way for me to win this fight is to take it down and to use my dominant grappling game to my advantage. And he did exactly that. Then he got on the mic and called out Colby Covington. And he's healthy because he didn't let himself get into a brawl. He can take any fight right away. He's saying, put me as a coach on The Ultimate Fighter. Whatever. I mean, this was a flawless performance from Gilbert Burns.
As you said, he wins by submission victory via arm triangle at 4:15 of round number 1. Then calls out the aforementioned Colby Chaos Covington. Seems to be, you know, he's been radio silent for a while now, but seems to be the most called out fighter now. You know, there's been a number of fighters that are just getting called out by everybody. Insert Colby into that discussion. Why is Colby getting called out? Does everybody realize just the value that they get just by even facing a Colby?
Well, that's what I think it is. I think it's twofold. Number one, you know where Colby Covington sits in the division, right? He was the number 1 contender for a long time. He's only number 2 now because Leon Edwards had that amazing upset of Kamaru Usman, so that drops Usman down to number 1. So Covington's right there. We know the amazing title fights he had with Usman. So his position in the rankings is well established, and I think that's part of it. But the flip side of it as well is you know that Colby Covington is going to help sell the fight. He's going to generate interest in the fight because he's going to talk. He's going to talk trash. He's going to get people engaged in the fight. So you get the best of both worlds. You know that if I beat Colby Covington, there's really no argument that I need to beat anybody else for a title shot. And at the same time, you know that he's going to stir the interest, get the public involved in it. So that's why everybody wants to match up with Colby. And listen, I mean, Gilbert Burns has said, you know, both publicly and to me privately as well, that he has a lot of respect for Colby Covington, that he does understand Colby's a great fighter. I mean, for all the people that want to talk trash about Colby because of the trash he talks, to a man, they'll all tell you, but he is very, very good. So he's not looking at it as an easy fight by any stretch. But I think that's what we love about Gilbert Burns as well, man. He got at the post-fight press conference afterwards, he was back there saying, listen, I just want a big fight. I'm not asking for anybody to give me anything. I'm here to work. I'm here to take on the toughest challenges possible. Please give me those tough matchups. Gilbert Burns is an absolute stud, and he's got some big fights coming his way.
That's a banger, by the way. Like, you're looking at a guy, Colby, who one can strike, relentless pressure, high-level collegiate wrestling, dominated, by all accounts, the best jiu-jitsu practitioner in this sport in Damian Maia, dominated him on the ground, going against potentially a Gilbert Burns who has knockout power in both hands, can strike, maybe a little recklessly at times, but can strike, not to mention he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu world champion.
I love it.
That
And
has
I love
money written all over it.
I love the matchup, and I love the pitch of putting him on the Ultimate Fighter because the character that Colby Covington is, right? I mean, that dude he's gonna stir the pot. He's gonna poke and prod and talk some trash. And look, I mean, for love it or hate it, that's good TV, right? Stirring the pot a little bit and creating that controversy. So I love the idea.
I'd watch it.
Absolutely.
And I'm a Colby fan. I understand that. I get the shtick. I understand that there was some beef there, but if you got a problem with my man John Morgan, you got a problem with me. But take that aside. I'm a Colby fan. I love the shtick. I love the way he fights, particularly. I've always loved watching those pressure fighters, those relentless dogs. Because, like you said, a lot of people may not say it publicly, but they all realize that Colby Covington is that dog. But if you take a dog and you put him up against a dog with the same game plan, I mean, Gilbert Burns was walking down Hazmat.
Mm-hmm.
He was using the Colby Covington pressure against Chimaev. Who does that against Hazmat?
No, I love that. And that's the thing about Colby Covington. And yeah, personal beef aside, look, I'm still a Colby fan. You'll go back to when the whole thing started with me and him. If you check the tape, I was laughing when he was talking trash about me. I was like, well, I guess it's my day that I just get caught with the shrapnel. And then it escalated further, and I don't know where it stands now. But as a fighter, I still remain a fan as well because I love that too. When you can keep that relentless pressure on somebody, when you see that opponent and you see the look on their face when they finally break, right? When they finally realize, like, I cannot get this dude off me. I cannot stay away. I cannot get it. I mean, that's something. When you're using that as a weapon to break somebody, your cardio, your pressure, and it's just such a mental taxation, a physical taxation. It's pretty cool to see.
I mean, even so much is that Masvidal, after their fight, I mean, was literally being draped up by people because he was so physically exhausted. And he wasn't even that exhausted when he fought Kamaru Usman on 2 weeks' notice and went 5 rounds.
Yep, it's incredible. It's a different level stuff, man. I love the matchup. I know there was talks of Hamzat and Colby being matched up, but, it just seems like everything's kind of slow to get together. Colby, I think, is still dealing with the legal situation with the Masvidal thing, so I don't know what his exact availability is just yet, but maybe the TV show helps that, right? I mean, that's another reason the Ultimate Fighter might make sense. If he can't fight right now because of his legal situation, at least if he can coach, then he can still be involved in the sport. He can still be out there. He can still be setting up fights and staying involved. So that's why this might make a lot of sense.
And it puts him back in the limelight where we know chaos likes to be. Now, a couple other fights on the main card that, we don't really have to get into, but I do got to get into, and we talked about it. I love the showcase fight for Shogun, putting him on primetime ABC. I still stand by that. He got to retire on ABC, but it was marred for the simple fact is, one, he got knocked out.
Yeah.
And then two, Ihor, I can't hard time pronounce his name, but Poteria.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a weird last name.
We're gonna leave that Ihor. We're gonna go Ihor for now. After the knockout, classless in victory or just part of the game. And you know what, Shogun, you got to deal with it. What's your take?
It's tough, right? Because Shogun, all the great things I said about Glover Teixeira, they translate 100% to Shogun Rua as well. One of the most respected, universally revered athletes by his peers, by everyone involved in the sport, a true legend. And you knew coming into this, look, the Ihor was the favorite for a reason, and you knew what the likely scenario was. But we were all hoping, begging to the MMA gods that something would happen. He landed that two-piece combo early, and I'm like, oh, we might get one. But ultimately, he fell victim. Now, here's the problem. Not a lot of people know much about Ihor. He's just starting his UFC career. Well, his nickname is the Duelist. So that was his dance that he was doing, was him doing a duel, basically, with, a weapon. And he said afterwards, he explained to it, and if you notice, I pointed the weapon towards him, and then I pointed it to the air, and I shot it in the air. I was showing him respect, because even though I'm the Duelist, I would never shoot at Shogun. I'm shooting away from him. Okay, I get it. I think that was all very much lost in translation because most people watching have no idea who Ihor is.
this is the first I'm hearing of that as well.
Exactly. And I think for most people it wasn't. So I think it was misinterpreted a little bit. So for that reason, I feel kind of bad for Ihor because I think he's getting a bad rap out of this thing. He didn't mean for it to be. But at the same time, I will say, I don't think he did himself any justice. I mean, this is an MMA legend. You're in his home country of Brazil. He's made it clear he's going to be retiring afterwards. So I think most of us would just like to hear you say, hey, man, it was an honor for me to step in here with you. Like, obviously, I'm kind of sad as well, but of course he was trying to knock me out. That's the point of the sport. I just did what I was supposed to do. But, thank you, Shogun, for all you've given the sport. And thank you for allowing me to be here. Instead, he does the dueling dance and then he gets on the mic and yelling and screaming. I think people are like, bro, settle down. We need a moment. We need a moment to kind of, digest all this.
I would say that it's just part of the game. Unless it comes to Shogun, then it's not part of the game. It's classless in victory. But hey, listen, I'm not going to hold a grudge, or I'm not. It's just in that moment, man. Like in my infancy, I'm not even going to say my infancy. My infancy of this game was in the 90s. But in like where the passion grew is watching Shogun in Pride stomping dudes' heads, man. I just hate to see him go out like that. And the dueling, the whatever, it looked like breakdancing over the guy's body to me. Is what it looked like. So, like, I would say just, man, okay, don't do it anymore. Don't do it to any more legends on their retirement fight. I mean, could you imagine Jamahal Hill standing over Glover in the corner as he's getting all patched up doing a break dance over him? Like, could you imagine that? That's essentially what happened to Shogun here. And on one hand, I just say, yeah, it's part of the game. It's part of it. Like, listen. But I'm like, it's Shogun, baby. And like you said, I was thinking about this. How many fighters? I can think of like one at the top of my head that they are not even referred to by their real names at all. Because a lot of times you have fighters that are, so-and-so, the whatever, and then their last name. You are just known by your nickname, Shogun. The only other one I can think of off the top of my head is Rampage. Those are the only two. And obviously they're linked forever together. But when you are just known by your nickname and no other, like even nobody just calls Wanderlei Silva the Axe Murderer. They call him the Axe Murderer, Wanderlei Silva, or whatever. Everybody knows the nickname. But with Shogun, probably half the fans out there don't even know his real name. They just know him by Shogun.
It's true. If you think about it, I mean, that's what when it's weird to be Mauricio Hua, you're like, what? You're like Shogun. It's funny because in my years of writing, I used to have this conversation with Dan Stupp, the former editor of MMA Junkie. Is like, well, how do we refer to him? Because technically, like when you write a headline, you should use the guy's real name, Mauricio Hua. But to be honest with you, everybody knows him as Shogun. So if you don't put Shogun in there, they're not going to exactly recognize who you're talking about. Just a legend, man. I mean, the run through the Pride Middleweight Grand Prix. One of the greatest tournament run of all time, made it to the level of UFC champion as well. And as I said, just universally respected. I mean, it was wild on fight weeks, man. Like I don't care who's like milling about when Shogun walks in the room, everybody kind of stops and shows their respect. It's like, oh, that's Shogun. And I mean, there's athletes, it's a typical UFC fight week. You've got 24 to 30 athletes or whatever, because they're all there for their fights. But those athletes would all, to a man, to a woman, go up and get a picture with Shogun. I mean, that's your peer, supposedly, because you're all in the same fight card, but even his peers recognize that he's a cut above, and they're like, I want to go get a picture with that man because he is a legend. And they would tell him, you inspired me, man. I watched you when I was a kid, and I watched what you were doing. I was like, I want to do that. I want to be that guy. Just a legend. And to see him go away, it's just the truth, man. You don't go out in victory very often in this sport, but I think we were all hoping for one. And, he got that early combination. I thought the gods might be nice to us, but it didn't pan out. But just can't say enough about what a legend Shogun is. It's sad to see him walk away, but he had a legendary career, and he will remain a legend in the sport.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Fighters that aren't known by their first and last name in conjunction with a nickname. They're just known by their nickname. I threw out two. It's the only two I could think of. Rampage, Shogun. Who am I missing?
I think about the early days. I mean, one that always stood out to me very early on was Bang Ludwig. That's old school. I mean, now again, that's the last name incorporated in there, but nobody called him Dwayne Ludwig. He was Bang Ludwig. Big Nog, I think maybe Big Nog and Little Nog, or I mean,
yeah, that was to differentiate though.
it was to differentiate and just because they have really long names, I think, you know what I mean? One that's not a nickname, but one that's always interesting for me is how about, I mean, Fedor is just Fedor, right? I mean, of course he's Fedor Emelianenko, but he's just Fedor. There's just a handful of them like that because you're right. There's not a ton like that.
And I think that's like an ultimate sign of like, you've made it.
That's it. And give me CM Punk because nobody calls him Phil Brooks.
Well, and a lot of people just call him Punk.
Exactly. So throw him in there too.
All right. Well, legend retires. 2 legends retired of the game Saturday night. And then we had a very emotional tribute, which we were all saying we would have wished he would have gone out in his home of Rio de Janeiro. But then he gets the tribute and the nod into the Hall of Fame. How special was that?
It's funny, right? Because I did think, man, how weird that his last fight is in Salt Lake City, Utah, right? Like it could have been in Brazil. But at the same time, we're talking about Glover Teixeira going out with the loss, Shogun going out with the loss. So instead, Jose Aldo gets his nomination into the UFC Hall of Fame, gets the tribute video, beautiful tribute video listing his accomplishments, people, talking about what a legend he truly is and was. And then he gets to, stand up and take the ovation from the crowd and, kisses his coach, kisses his wife. And you can see the tears, what it meant to him. I mean, seeing that real emotion. That's why I say this card was a journey for me, man. There were just all these emotions, but that was special. Jose Aldo. And it's crazy because if somebody's not real familiar with the sport, I may sound like a broken record right now talking about these 3 individuals, but I can't think of 3 individuals like this in Glover Teixeira, Shogun Rua, and Jose Aldo, who are all universally revered as fighters, as men behind the scenes. And Jose Aldo was one of those guys as well, man, a true man of the people in Brazil. I mean, still to this day goes out and goes to the soccer games and hangs out with the crowd and doesn't want to be like a different level or a cut above or, in some secluded area. Like he wants to be among the people. And just, I mean, his WEC run, those nasty leg kicks that he threw, the leaping double knee of Cub Swanson. I mean, the just absolute destruction of Uriah Faber. You'll remember those famous social media posts like a week later from Uriah showing his leg just completely bruised up. I mean, Jose Aldo in his prime especially was an absolute killer. And cool to see, by the way, because I didn't even know it until I knew he was interested in it. But they made the announcement after he was inducted to the Hall of Fame that his professional boxing debut is going to be on UFC Fight Pass on February 10th, I believe was the date. So, not going to fight MMA anymore, but now going to chase his passion of boxing. So we're still going to get to see him around a little bit.
Fun all the way around. It was great to see him get the tribute and the send-off that we had hoped he was going to get. But let's go. Moving ahead. February 4th, we got 2 events that night. UFC Fight Night. Derek Lewis versus Louis Spivak. Say Lewis twice in one sentence. That's a little oxymoron. And then kind of the fun one too, to agree. Ryan Bader versus Fedor 2. Now, if you guys recall, Fedor got knocked out and got sat down by a jab and it was all done. Weird pairing with that Bader Fedor 2. But I believe it's network television. And so just putting the name out there, I mean, help me make sense of that matchup. I mean, Bader is still the champ.
Fedor wanted this fight, which just goes to show you the type of competitor that Fedor is, that this is going to be his final U.S. fight. He's nearing retirement. I think he's planning to do potentially one more before he calls it quits, but not here in the United States. This is going to be on CBS network television. I'm actually going out there, even though that UFC Fight Night event is here in Las Vegas. Just an opportunity to see Fedor one more time. I'm heading out to Inglewood, California to see that one. As a fan, you'll actually be able to watch them both because the Bellator card is earlier in the day, and that UFC card was originally going to be in South Korea, so it's got a lot of Asian athletes on it, so they're airing it very late at night here so they can be seen in Asia. But Fedor Emelianenko wanted this fight. I think, Scott Coker and Bellator Brass, I think they were kind of thinking along the lines of, what kind of legend fight can we make for you? What kind of peer can we find for you that, maybe is a little closer to you in terms of age? And Fedor says, no. I don't want any special arranged matchups. I want to challenge the champion again. I want to fight for the title. And they said, hey, you know what, man? That's what you want. And I think, honestly, they tried to talk him out of it a little bit and say, hey, we can get you more of a showcase matchup. And he's like, no, I don't want a showcase matchup. I'm Fedor Emelianenko. Give me the champ and Ryan Bader. And I think they finally just relented and said, man, Fedor, we have got that much respect for you. If that's what you want, that's the fight we're going to make. Look, Ryan Bader's the favorite in this one, understandably so. He's the reigning title holder, but Fedor still packs a pop, man. And if he can lay those hands on you, he could shock the world.
I always say when my wife's like, "Hey, do you think we can do this?" I say, "Baby want, baby get." You know, and I'm going to put that. Scott Coker probably says, "Well, Fedor want, Fedor get."
That's the truth. That's the truth.
And we want to talk about somebody like we talked about Shogun in the early 2000s in Pride. Woo! Fedor in those days. I mean, I can't think of another like an aura that somebody had about them than Fedor had back in the Pride days. I mean, I'll never forget Randleman suplexing him on his effing head. How that didn't break his neck. And then he ends up, knocking him out.
That's one of the all-time highlights, man. That's one of the craziest highlights you'll ever see in mixed martial arts, Vinny-Con. But yes, for people that weren't following the sport during the Pride era, it's hard to contextualize, right? That organization was actually bigger than the UFC. So Fedor, he never fought in the UFC, and a lot of people use that as a way to kind of degrade what he accomplished as a fighter. Say, well, the guy never got it done in the UFC. You need to understand and put it in perspective that at that time, the better heavyweight division was in Pride. The bigger organization was in Pride. And this man was dominating. I mean, an incredible win streak. And yes, he's had some setbacks as of recent years, but that's just what happens in mixed martial arts. Unfortunately, nobody stays undefeated, sans for Khabib Nurmagomedov. But of course, he hung it up as well. And who knows what would have happened if he'd have continued. But Fedor Emelianenko still has that aura about him, especially to us old school fans, right? Like I can imagine maybe there's some that'll just be like, well, it's Fedor and he's in his 40s and what. But when you go there, man, he's still that stoic individual, right? That doesn't really give a lot of facial expression, that, kind of, even when he talks, just kind of very deadpan. He really thinks about things, but then he just kind of delivers it very evenly and, understands some English for sure. He's picked up over the other years, but just, sticks to speaking in Russian. And, but I mean, it's just a true legend of the sport. And so I'm honored to go out there in 2 weeks and to cover his final U.S. fight. It'll be amazing to see him. If I'm being honest, I'm favoring Ryan Bader, of course. Yeah. I mean, that's just being realistic. But there's that little piece of you that's just, honored to go get to see Fedor one more time.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, this is how revered Fedor is. And I know there's conflict and, Russia necessarily isn't an ally to the United States these days. But didn't he get a position as like an ambassador to the Russian Federation? I mean, just on like the knighting of the sword, like this is how big you are worldwide. We grant you this.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was granted that status. And I could tell you from being over there, because I did cover a UFC event in Moscow. And so I did get to go to Russia. And they were having a big fan fest before. And this was before Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov. And, I thought we decided we were going to do a video. Like, let's just get fan predictions. And I was like, well, this is going to be weird. We're in Russia asking for fan predictions. Like, aren't they all going to say Khabib? But Conor was so popular, like a lot of them were saying Conor McGregor. Like they were picking Conor because, Conor is this huge global superstar. So even in Russia, they were picking against Khabib. But then when you started to talk to fans about, well, who's your favorite fighter? I mean, to a man, Fedor. I mean, Fedor is legend status in his home country, not just like popular athlete. I mean, legend status. So, I mean, it's like I said, it's an honor. It's an honor to go see him one more time. He's facing an uphill battle, but I mean, this is, Shogun was the end of an era, right? This is the end of an era. And we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I'm looking forward to it.
1 month away. We are 1 month, well, a couple days short of a month away, but 1 month away from Islam versus Volkanovski, Islam Makhachev versus Volkanovski, February 18th, down under. Man, and I'm going to tell you this, John Morgan. The closer it gets, the more convinced I am that Volkanovski has what it takes to pull it off.
Wow. I'm still so torn on this one. They did a face-off down in Australia to promote the event, so we got to see that face-off over the weekend. And, no surprise, we saw it in the cage when they did it last. I mean, there's a huge size difference between these two athletes. Now, of course, right now, Islam isn't down at weight, so a little bit of that size will shrink a little bit between now and then as he sheds some pounds to cut weight. But there's a big size difference. But yeah, how do you go against Alexander Volkanovski? I mean, top pound for pound on the planet, insane win streak. I mean, has just been in some incredible fights. I am pumped up for this fight. And, you wonder, look, Habib has stepped away from coaching, still involved, but not going to be in the corner, not necessarily taking a leading role. Will that have any impact whatsoever on Islam Makhachev? I don't know. Islam is going to have to travel to Australia. So it's kind of the backyard of Alexander Volkanovski. Does that factor into it a little bit at all? I don't know. I mean, there's just little things that add in.
The speed difference is what I am so intrigued about here.
Yep. The speed difference is a big part of it, man. And gosh, I'm having a hard time picking against Islam, but as soon as I start to say, so that means you're picking against Volkanovski, like that sounds just as silly. So this is a big one, man. Cannot wait for this one.
That's like when it was announced, I was like, oh, come on. Islam's going to run through him. I'm like, but this, and then, but that. And like, listen, I still got Islam, but I am convinced Volk can get it done.
You can't doubt the man. You cannot doubt the man. And you have to respect the man for wanting to do that, right? It's not like he said, hey, I'll face Islam, but he's got to cut to 45. He said, no, I'll go up to his weight class. I'll fight him there. I'm going to do this. I want this champ status. I want to take on you think this is the baddest dude on the planet? I'm the baddest dude on the planet. Let's make this happen. You just have to respect that. And man, I mean, Volkanovski, I think is saying all the right things. It's like, he's not trying to deny that Islam has great wrestling. He's like, yeah, but I'm not going to panic. If he takes me down, I will work my way back to my feet. I will get back up. I'm not going to panic. A lot of people panic. I mean, he's saying all the right things, not just things where you're like, oh no, I'm the baddest dude and I'm going to prove to you. No, it's when you're acknowledging what somebody's strengths are and you say, but we've got plans to deal with that. We understand how to break down his game and what it means. I mean, it's just, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great one. Of course, you got the interim title fight in the co-main event as well. So that's another big pay-per-view a couple weeks away.
Well, we have a lot of time between now and then to break down every single thing it is about that fight. And I'm pretty sure the nerd fighting type guys that we will break down every single thing between now and then. But really fun episode. What do you got going on this weekend? I know you're going to be traveling to some very cold places.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. Not a lot of major MMA this weekend. The PFL is launching their Challenger Series on Friday night, so that'll be on Fubo TV if you're fiending for some MMA kind of prospects looking to make it in the PFL. But me, I'm going to be making my way to Moncton, Canada, out on the East Coast for my first. Yep, Moncton, Canada, for Fight League Atlantic. It's the first time that I'm working with them, and I think we're going to be doing some things together this year. I'll be doing commentary for them. It'll be an online pay-per-view that you can purchase at their website. But as you mentioned, and I've been in contact with them for the last couple months as we were kind of talking about this and working it out. And they were they were great because they were even like, dude, we're doing a show in January, but if you want to wait till March, we're going to do a show in March too, because it's going to be really cold in January. And if you don't want to come up here, we totally understand. And I'm like, nah, man. I mean, I want to work with you guys, and I've never been out to that part of the country in Canada, and so can't wait to go. And they're like, okay, just understand it's going to be a little chilly. And I said, oh no, don't worry about it. I've been to some cold places. But as I've been looking on my iPhone this week for the weather, so far on Fight Day this upcoming Saturday, the weather is calling for a high of 28. And a low of 1 degree.
And that's without a wind chill. Wait until the wind kicks up. Wait until the wind kicks up. You get a 10-mile-an-hour wind out there, which is not that much. Now you're negative 10 degrees.
It's going to be cold. So I'm looking forward to getting up there and see what it's all about. They promised me some fun times out there. And it's kind of a fishing town. So they're like, man, we'll have some great, some fantastic seafood available for you as well. And we'll show you around the town a little bit. Small town, but man, it's just a group of guys that are committed. They're Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts. They're fans of the sport, and they're really committed to like kind of growing the game in that area and giving athletes an opportunity to kind of gain experience and get themselves ready for the next level. And I just love that. I mean, anybody that's passionate about this sport, that loves working in the sport, that has a real desire to help athletes move forward and to help grow the sport itself, like that's an honor for me to work with people like that. So been nothing but pleasant in dealing with them, in all of our communication so far. Now I get to go meet them in person for the first time this weekend. So heading out Thursday night, and we'll arrive Friday morning. Fights are on Saturday night. Fight League Atlantic. It's going to be cold.
And that's where you're going to have the production meeting about bringing on a color commentary guy, right? Because you said you were going to have it prior to, but I'm just assuming you're going to wait until you get out there to really give it the full pitch in person.
Well, that's it. I didn't really want, I got to go in and, get to know the lay of the land first. I didn't want to come in with these hardcore demands right off the bat. But, we'll be dropping little hints over there. We'll be dropping little hints.
Boom. And then tell them they can reach me out on Twitter at _MacLife. So what do I got going on this weekend? I don't even know. I don't know what I got going on the rest of the week because I got everything going on. So too much to explain here. But fun episode, new champ, legends retire, a lot to look forward to. John, it was fun. For John Morgan, I'm Eric McMahon. You can catch us here next week on Cageside with John Morgan.